Welcome to the Wednesday Yachting Luncheon, live from the virtual grill room of the St. Francis Yacht Club. Since you can't come down to the grill room during this COVID-19 pandemic, we thought we'd bring the grill room to you with these Wednesday Yachting Luncheons online. Imagine being a young boy and you grew up and were born and raised in San Jose, but all through your childhood, your family's summers in Minnesota, and you spend all your time on a lake or lakes. And as you grow up, you are constantly playing around in little boats. And when you're a 7-year-old, your folks say to you, okay, here's a 12-foot long aluminum skiff for you to play with, go off and play. In the same way that nowadays a kid might be given a tricycle, our speaker today grew up playing on little boats in the water. At age 9, his mother took sailing lessons in San Jose, and she immediately brought our speaker out to sail with her. And she was taken aback by how rapidly he picked up sailing. It was kind of like he already knew how to sail, probably because she'd given him the boat to play with at an earlier age. He, at age 13, visited the Monterey Aquarium and was completely taken aback by all the growth of creatures and animals under the water. He couldn't believe that we would be spending time going out to the moon and Mars and outer space and have any interest in outer space exploration when there were so many unknown features underwater. He would go on to get a degree in viniculture from UC Davis and make a whole career in the wine business before 2015 shifting to combining his interest in the sea and his love of creatures underwater with his business interest as he started harvesting expensive seafood kelp, that's to say seaweed, for which he could sell for between $15 and $100 a pound to gourmet high-end restaurants and distributors. He began doing that all up and down, the Sonoma coast and down north of San Francisco. And then in 2019, one of the more famous bottom professionals in San Francisco Bay, Bottom Bob, who has quite a good carriage trade of beautiful yachts, he started introducing our speaker today as a colleague. And then when Bottom Bob died in 2019, our speaker today repackaged with his own brand and added a lot of high-tech twists and features that I, as a user, have found to be quite surprising and remarkable and beneficial. So with a smile and happiness that we're able to bring him to you, I'm pleased to introduce Kevin Kelley to the Wednesday Yachting Luncheon, professional diver. Kevin, welcome to the Wednesday Yachting Luncheon.
Thank you so much, Ron. I really appreciate the invitation and the honor to come and tell my story and share with you what I'm working on right now. Actually bring you below the surface of the water as I jump into the water of the harbors and work on your boats, because it's truly a different world down there. And that's what I want to get into. I want to separate the difference between above the surface and below the surface. So today we're going to talk about underwater care and the modern take on it. So when I jump into the water, this is the first thing that I see. This is the bow of a boat. And looking at this, you can see this is the leading edge and the hull going back. Looking at this, honestly, I could stare at this for a long time because it tells me so much about the boat. And as I jump into the water and I spend the next 45 minutes to an hour working and cleaning and taking care of this vessel, it tells me so much. I learned so much about it. And back in the beginning, I would jump in and I'd take care of the boat, get it all cleaned up, looking great. And I'd get out, and then all of my information that I found, which was pages of information, I would distill it down into a pretty standard report for the industry. So as I started out, this was the industry standard. You would come back and talk about the paint. Was it in good condition or was it in poor condition? You talk about the fittings, the through holes, and the transducers, and the knot meter paddle wheels. And they'd be checked and they'd be cleared, but that's all you'd mention about them. The running gear, you would tell if the propeller and the shaft were in good, fair, or poor condition. And then you would mention the anodes, you know, whether you replaced them or how much they were through their life. Were they brand new at 100%, or were they at the tail end of their life at 25% and ready to be replaced? What I really wanted to do was I wanted to bring the clients with me, and as a lifelong entrepreneur and a business owner, and honestly as a father, I lived by this mantra: show me, don't tell me. It was something that resonated with me, and that's exactly what I wanted to do with my clients. I wanted to show them. I didn't want to tell them about their boat. So I wanted to bring them down with me. I wanted to show them the bow of their boats and explain that this is 1 month of growth during the winter on their boat. And this is what she looks like, all polished up and nice and clean. I wanted to show them that the yard did a phenomenal job painting prop speed on their sail drive. I didn't want to tell them that. I wanted to give them a picture that explained it to them. It is much easier with pictures to explain difficult concepts. For instance, in this case, this is the bow here, and we're looking at the starboard side over here. So in this case, this slip was running east to west, so it had a very distinct sun side and shade side. The starboard side was the shade side, so it had significantly less growth, which you can explain, but it's much easier to show compared to this, which is the port side with significantly more growth. Now I can show you that one side of your hull is taking a lot more wear and tear because it takes a lot more to scrub this growth off, and growth damages paint on your boat. So, and that's why your port side is in poor condition and your starboard side is still in brand new condition like it was just from the yard. Now, revealing little intricacies like this did not show up in those past reports. And then I could sit down with clients and come up with solutions. You know, maybe when you return to your slip, you could pull in stern first to kind of shift things around in this case. Or every other month, pull in bow first to kind of even out the growth and even out the wear on your paint. And that will lengthen the life of your paint overall. Of course, that didn't show up in these old reports. And that was my big problem. I had so much information, and these reports were just not transmitting all of that information I had. They were not an accurate representation of what I was seeing. So when I started Marin Yacht Care, the first thing I did was get rid of that report, and I switched over and created this new report here. So this is the reports we send out to all of our clients at Marin Yacht Care. It's a web page just for you that's password protected. That starts out with your boat, starts out with your cleaning schedule, when it was last cleaned, when it's going to be cleaned next. A summary that links all of the past cleanings with the current cleaning and actually looks to the future and tells you what to expect in the future. A very quick representation visually of how your boat's doing, the condition of the paint in the different areas of the vessel, and the life of your different anodes, where they are and when you might expect to replace them. If you continue down, you'll get video updates and then very clear pictures that go through all of the major areas of the vessel. This is great because it shows you how they're aging over time, how they're being affected by the ocean over time. So here are the before the cleaning pictures, so you can see if you are in the summer or the winter and how much growth your vessel is seeing. As you continue down the page, you have a full video and photo library of your vessel and the amazing care that you've been given to it. At the very bottom, you get downloadable reports. So if you click here, you can download an abbreviated report. And that will give you the same summary and very explicit descriptions of your anodes and the paints, and then pictures of the main components of your vessel. So there's a lot of information in these reports.
Can you show us one of the videos? Can you show us one of the videos in a report?
Yes, absolutely. So these videos happen after the cleaning, so you can clearly see exactly all of the features of the boat. So this is a Hinckley, so this is the trim tab. Let's see if there's enough bandwidth here. So here's the jet drive, and you can see the anodes. You can see the wear of the paint along the jets. And as you go through it, we kind of cycle through and see all the important things. Here's an anode on it. Here's the anode on the stern, on the transom. And it slowly reviews every part of your vessel. This can become very important too for tracking any issues that might come up. There have been many times where I come across a small issue and it raises a red flag for me, and then I can go back and review the pictures and the videos to see exactly when it started, how long it's been going on, and how far in the process it has gone. And that can be very important history for the yard or the electrician or whoever has to go in, the specialist who's going to come in and actually solve that problem for you. So with so much information in these reports, let's go through and chat about the different components that we go through. So first we'll talk about paint. So there are two main types of paints. We'll start with epoxy paint. So epoxy paint is known as hard bottom paint. Here's an example of a bow with epoxy paint on it. Now, epoxy paint is very durable. It does not come off. The biocide, the anti-fouling components of it are in it, and it slowly comes to the surface. And so what that means is we can scrub it pretty hard without removing the paint. Here is above the water line, so you can kind of see the paint not underwater here. So as this paint ages, as it gets older, there is less anti-fouling in it, so we can scrub it really hard and remove all the growth without actually removing the paint. The big benefit to that is it is actually very gentle on the environment. You're not releasing paint or anti-fouling chemicals into the water. That's the big benefit there. Next is ablative paint, or it's also called self-polishing paint. Here's the bow of a boat with ablative paint on it. So it's self-polishing, which means that it actually sloughs off the boat in very thin layers. So the paint is coming off, and what that does is it removes the growth and exposes fresh paint underneath it. Again, here's the bow going back with another view of the paint a little closer. Now that's great because it creates a very smooth, a very fast surface with fresh paint. Now you have to be gentle with it because as it comes off, if you take your hand even and wipe it along ablative paint, you actually can see the paint coming off in clouds. And that is unfortunately the downside environmentally to ablative paint. You are removing paint and leaving it in the water column as paint molecules and the anti-fouling, the copper molecules in the ocean. Here is more ablative paint with a through hole, and this is the water up here that you can see. The next type of paint that we'll talk about is prop speed, and that is for all of the metals on your boat. The propeller shaft, the propellers themselves, the blades, trim tabs, swim platform supports, anything metal on your boat. And they have other products that will cover through holes and transducers and lights as well. Now, the great thing about prop speed is it creates such a smooth surface that growth, while it will grow on it, the second there's water movement, it comes right off. So here is a dirty sail drive. So you can see the blades of the propeller here curling around. This is dirty. You can see all the growth hanging off of this. Now, since it's such a smooth surface, I can't scrub it with a pad. That will damage it. I have to be very careful with it. So I just take a gloved hand and very gently wipe it over the top. And by doing that, you have an almost brand new paint covering. You can see this is the same exact sail drive. Here's a close-up of the blade. You can see the body back here. This is an anode, and this is another anode here that protects the metal. Here's another example on a motor yacht. So this is a trim tab. So this is a metal surface that can actuate up and down to control the angle that the boat's traveling in the water. So this is a whole bunch of debris and growth that has settled on this flat metal surface of the boat with the prop speed on it. Now pay attention to this one area right here. This is what's called a clamshell anode. So it's a flat circular disc that's bolted onto the trim tab to protect it. So you can kind of see the bolt sticking out here. So this is the same exact trim tab with just disturbing the water around it and running my hand over it. You can see it almost looks brand new. Here's that same anode with the bolt sticking out. So to go from this to this with just waving a gloved hand around and wiping it with your fingers is pretty amazing. The other great thing about prop speed is it doesn't have any anti-fouling chemicals in it. It's all physical protection. And so it is much better on the environment, and it isolates your metals from the ocean. So it does not have it's not affected by the galvanic corrosion in the ocean because the metal is completely encased in this paint. So it will not corrode if you have a nice fresh layer of prop speed over it. So that's actually protecting the crucial metals on your boat if you have prop speed. So to kind of reveal or go through the really important side of bottom paint is talking about the anti-fouling properties of it. So here's a bow of a boat with a blade of paint on it. The anti-fouling refers to the paint's ability to inhibit growth. And we grade it from either dead, meaning it's completely inactive or ineffective, to 100% if it's brand new, if it's brand new paint job. So let's kind of compare and contrast. Here is a boat that's fresh back from the yard, brand new paint on it. So you can see the growth, it grows on there. You know, this is the ocean and things grow on everything, even if you're trying to protect it. And so you can expect growth on your boat in the winter, in the summer, if the water's cold, if the water's warm, if there's a lot of sun, if there's not a lot of sun, there will always be growth out there. So even on brand new paint jobs, you're gonna see growth. This is 1 month of growth. This is in the summertime on a boat, and you can see these little bubbles forming here. These little bubbles are the anti-fouling properties of the boat actually killing the growth on the paint surface. And what happens is that these bubbles get bigger and bigger, and then they pop. And what you have under, you can kind of see here, this bubble is popping. You have fresh paint underneath it. So with a very gentle hand and a very light cloth, you could wipe over this once with very little pressure at all, and you are back to a brand new looking paint on the bottom of the vessel. So let's go a little forward in time. We're going to fast forward with another vessel here. This is completely different with white paint on it this time. So this one has about 40% life left in it. It's about 40% effective. So you can still see the pockets of the white paint showing through on the growth, which is great. That means that there's still anti-fouling left in this paint. Now, however, you can also see these areas of growth where larger species of algae actually have taken hold and they're growing and they're thriving on it. That's why this is graded lower. Now this one won't wipe off with a nice easy cloth once. You'll have to use a soft scrubber on this one, have to go through it 2 or 3 times, but you can still get it back to looking nice and clean and beautiful. This is the same exact area of that hole just after it's clean. Now let's take a second to chat about anodes. Anodes, commonly referred to as zincs, we are now doing a shift in the industry away from zinc and towards aluminum anodes. Now, why are we going towards aluminum? There's a long list of reasons why we're moving to aluminum. But the most important ones are it provides better protection for your vessel. Aluminum will degrade faster than zinc, and so it will degrade better and protect your metals better. Aluminum's far lighter than zinc. You don't need to carry all the weight of heavy zinc anodes with you. The difference in weight is pretty significant. And then overall, aluminum's better for the ocean. When zinc falls off the anodes, it remains in the ocean, and zinc actually is a biocide, so it actually kills things. It won't allow things to grow. Aluminum does not do that, and so it is better for the environment and better for the ocean overall. So as these anodes protect the vessels, they will degrade over time. So to run you through a natural process of degradation, we want to make sure they're active. And so this is an aluminum anode on the end of a bow thruster. So in the bow of the boat, here are the blades of the thruster here going around. You can also see here the white fluffy stuff is aluminum oxide. This is the evidence that the aluminum is corroding away, showing you that you have an active anode. This is really important. If you're not seeing this, if you're not seeing these pits in the aluminum, that can indicate problems. So on a completely healthy boat, the anodes slowly degrade over time. So here is a sail drive on the bottom of the sailboat. So it comes down and goes out. Here are the blades of the sail drive. So you have 3, and the other one's here. And on the end, you have an anode, and you can see that white aluminum oxide showing you that this anode is actively protecting all the metals of the sail drive here. If we get a little closer to that and clean off all the aluminum oxide, so here is the sail drive coming this way. Here's a blade of the propeller here, here, and over here. This anode, you can see the edge of it is here. It actually started out way over here. So this is a long way into its life. You can actually see this little divot in the anode here. That is a little stud that's on the end of the propeller that locks the anode in place. So it's actually getting down to the pieces of the sail drive that hold it in place and make it effective. So it's definitely time to replace this anode. Out on the dock, you can clearly see that. This is that same anode removed, and it's on the dock next to a brand new one. So here's the brand new one. You can see how much smaller this one is. To kind of give you a better perspective, here's the brand new one installed. So you can see how far it goes to the edge. So that is completely normal. When anodes get to that level, it is time to replace them and get brand new ones on. Now, a big problem occurs when anodes become inactive. There are several reasons for them to become inactive, but when they do, it needs to be caught fairly quickly, and that's why we're looking for signs that they're working. Here is a picture of an inactive anode. So what we're looking at here, this is the bow thruster. This is starboard side looking through. So this is the port side, light coming through from the port side. You can see the blade here and here and up here and here. There are 4 blades on this starboard side bow thruster. Here is the anode, which should be a shiny aluminum anode with that white aluminum oxide growing off of it. All we can see is a black lump. So this is There is an anode here, but it's completely covered by slime growth, the black slime growth that you're seeing, and then these little strings of other algae growing on it. This is completely inactive. This is not protecting this vessel at all. And so the problem is, if the anode is not protecting the vessel, then the corrosive element of the ocean immediately finds the next suitable metal. In this case, it was a through hole. There's actually several through holes on this vessel. So what we're looking at, here's the through hole. This is, I'm gonna trace the outside edge of the through hole here. So you can see it goes far beyond that. The corrosion of the metal through hole is actually now extending into the paint and onto the hull of the boat. So it's removing the paint and getting into the hull of the boat. You can also see that the corrosion is closing the opening that allows either intake or output of this through hole here. So it's going to diminish the effectiveness of this through hole. So this is a significant problem that you need to catch very quickly. So as soon as this was seen, this was a new client, and we caught this, and then we immediately started to correct all of these issues. So this is the same bow thruster with a brand new anode on it. Everything was cleaned up. And the next step on this is to go back on an every other weekly basis and make sure that these anodes are degrading, make sure that they're active. And if they're not active, then we know more damage is happening, and we need to call in an expert to figure out exactly what's going on with this. Typically, it's an electrolysis or an electrical expert that can come out and look at the vessel, all the electrical systems of the vessel, and figure out exactly what's going on. So if you are on a monthly cleaning cycle with us, we can see little tiny issues pop up, and we call them areas of concern. And when we catch them within a few weeks, that's what they are, just a very small area of concern. If we're not catching them, they become big problems. So I'll give you some photographic examples of stray current issues inside a harbor, normal wear and tear on a vessel that just happens over time, strike damage. Everyone's run over some debris out in San Francisco Bay. That's pretty common. Mechanical issues that you might not be aware of, and then mishandling of the vessel. So the first one is the stray current. So what you're looking at here is the prop shaft with a brand new anode that we installed at the very end of September of last year. When we went back to this vessel 4 weeks later to clean it and check on it, this is what we found. So this is the prop shaft. So if it continues down, the propeller is over here to your right. Here's that same brand new anode that has significant levels of degradation on it. An anode should last months, and this one has lost about 40% of its weight in 4 weeks, which is pretty alarming. This corrosion was so quick, corrosion produces bubbles, but very small amount of bubbles over time. And with all the water currents and the movement of water underneath vessels, honestly, you never see them. But this corrosion was so significant and fast that all of those micro bubbles would lift off of this anode and rise up, and they were getting caught on the hull of the boat here. And so that was a major red flag that this anode was corroding so fast that there was a significant stray current problem. Now, fortunately, we were able to put more anodes on this boat and protect it, and then dive into the problem with the owner and with the harbor master and solve the problem. It turns out it was a neighboring boat that had recently left to be hauled out, and it turned out that that boat had significant electrical issues and significant electrical damage on the boat. Because of the stray current, it was emitting into the ocean next to this one. So problem solved, the stray current was gone, and we were able to return to normal service for this boat with no damage overall. If this carried on, this could have been a serious issue and caused major damage to this boat. The next one, so what we're looking at here is a transducer on the stern of a motor yacht. So you can see the transom here, and it extends over this way at a 90-degree right angle. Now the mounting bolts have just wiggled loose over time. This was a 4-week cleaning cycle, so 4 weeks in between cleaning cycles. So in that 4 weeks, these hard rubber plastic retaining rings have loosened up and shimmied all the way to the very last thread or two of these bolts, these 2 separate bolts here. If this owner continued using his vessel over the next week or two, there's no doubt that these bolts would have wiggled loose and fallen off, and then you would have had this big transducer with these metal arms flapping around at speed, destroying the transducer and causing damage to the hull of the boat itself. So we were able to find this, we were able to secure this properly, and the owner was able to use his vessel without concern going forward. So here's an example of a mechanical problem. So what we're looking at is we're on the bow of the sailboat, and this sailboat has a retractable bow thruster. So the bow thruster is inside the hull. It extends down into the water, so the propellers have access to the water, so it can maneuver the boat port or starboard, and then once it is not in use, it goes right back up into the hull. In this case, this bow thruster, for whatever reason, could not fully retract back up into the hull, so it was stuck in this position unbeknownst to the vessel owner. So they were sailing around thinking that it was closed and they had a smooth bottom, when in fact it was sticking down several inches into the water. So they were able to figure out what was the mechanical problem here and allow this to close completely flush. This is something that they would not have caught other than maybe losing a couple of knots off of their speed as they're out sailing around. Okay, the next thing is debris damage, strike damage. So we're looking at a stabilizing fin on a Hinckley. So this is the transom, the stern of the boat. This is the forward edge of one of several stabilizing fins on it. And as they were out enjoying their day on the bay, they ran over something in the water that hit this fin and smashed it into pieces. Now, this was caught quickly, so it was able to, it actually matched up very nicely with the time of year for the haul out, so they were able to haul it out and fix this. If this was not caught, the amount of pressure hitting this fin could have caused damage to the hull up in this area. And so you could have potentially had water incursion into the hull here, along with destroying this entire fin. But catching this early and bumping up the haul out date was a good thing to make sure that this fin is repaired and that you're actually not getting water into the hull itself. So the last one I will go through is mishandling. So this is a murky low tide day in Sausalito. This vessel, what we're looking at here is the bow of the boat. This is the bow thruster. So this vessel just was returned from the yard where it had its annual service. And as it was being relaunched on a trailer, something happened where the boat lifted up and then slammed back down onto the trailer. Now, I quickly found all of the trailer rash with carpet still embedded into the hull all along the entire length of this vessel. But the alarming thing was right up here. This was a crack that was about 18 to 20 inches long in the hull. Now, from here, you can't tell if that's just in the paint or if there's serious structural damage. So I was able to alert the vessel owner, and they were able to immediately haul it out and check this. And fortunately, it just damaged the gel coating, not the underlying structure, and they were able to patch it and get it back in the water quickly. If this went for several weeks and it was structural, it could have caused water incursion. And then also, this is a very significant part of the craft. It could have caused serious other damage to it. So getting it checked out and you know that you're good to go and it was repaired and all set is a tremendous peace of mind for this vessel owner. Now, since most of the St. Francis Club and all the people viewing this are racers, I just wanted to give a few pointers for your race day preparations. So since everyone wants a clean bottom to go as fast as they can on the race days, here are some pointers that you should take to heart. You should schedule your races far in advance with your diver. You know that everyone else is going to be calling, and the people who are calling last minute might not get cleaned. So make sure you schedule it far in advance. We always work very closely with our racers because the way we clean your boat on race days versus non-race days is very, very different. And so we can schedule things to, make sure that you are getting the best cleaning so you're the fastest right before your race days, and then doing alternate cleanings on non-race days to preserve the life of your paint overall. And then the other big thing is a lot of people like to have their vessel cleaned right before the race. We like to clean vessels 24 to 48 hours beforehand because in the off chance that we find an issue, we've got those hours to fix that problem and get you out racing at 100%. If we're doing it the day of, you're either canceling your race or you're racing with a handicap. So there isn't going to be a significant amount of growth in that 48 hours. You're still going to be going fast as can be, but you'll have peace of mind that your vessel is in top shape and you're going to be racing your absolute best out there. So to conclude, I just wanted to say, again, thank you so much, Ron, for inviting me to give this presentation and to show you what I'm doing to kind of bring you under the surface and kind of reveal what's happening under the water. And the St. Francis Yacht Club, thank you so much for hosting the speaker series. The whole thing, everything about it has been phenomenal and a great pleasure. And as a dedication to Bob Galvin, who brought me into this industry and showed me the ropes, I'm going to sign off just like he signed off every one of his emails with the smooth sailing.
Great. Thank you so much. It's great, Kevin, to see how much care you put to the underwater part of our boats. How many days a year are you in the water?
Depending on the season, I'm in the water 3 or 4 days a week.
3 or 4 days a week. More in the summer or less in the summer? What's your schedule like? How does your schedule vary seasonally?
Well, more in the summer because of the racing days, for sure. But most of our clients are on a pretty consistent schedule, so we can line them up so we have plenty of time to do all of the underwater care, but then we have to take all that information outside of the water and get that to them there. So I have a few days in the water, and then I have a couple days transmitting all of that information to them in office days, if you will.
So what's the power sail mix? What % of your clients are power versus sailboat?
It's actually pretty consistent with the bay. Right now, I'm a little more skewed towards the power yachts, just because word has been getting out that I specialize in Hinkley's, and so people have been calling me about those. But it's pretty even. I started out heavier on the sailboats, and it kind of goes back and forth. But I'm assuming that we'll settle right into the normal San Francisco Bay Area population of more sailboats than motor yachts.
How long does it take to do, let's say, a 40-foot sailboat, 40-foot powerboat? What's the difference between the length of time? How much time does it take?
Got it. So at 40 foot, if the paint is really good, I'm underwater for about
an hour.
Yeah, roughly about an hour. And then it's all the setup and prep. So time spent, I'm probably looking at 2 to 2.5 hours per vessel at that one.
And what do you wear? What is your garb when you're underwater?
It changes based on the season. I have a pretty thick wetsuit. I actually have a special 7mm wetsuit that's made by Hex Aquatic. And that actually has a carbon fiber Faraday cage in it. They're made for being out and interacting with wildlife, because all of your electrical body impulses are collected in the Faraday cage. but I actually use it since I'm swimming around in harbors and there's a potential for electrical currents in the water. I want to have that level of protection over me.
Describe again the electrical activity in the water for which you have to protect yourself with your wetsuit.
Well, with the electricity running down the docks and into all of the boats, there is a chance that there's stray currents out there. And it's a very slight chance, but still, I want to be as protected as possible. And this Hex wetsuit actually has a carbon fiber cloth in it. So if any electricity comes, it will actually flow over the wetsuit and actually not go into it.
So you don't get mild electricity damage to your body when your suit shields you from the electrical current in the water.
Yeah, it's one of those things where you have skin exposed in other areas, but it's just one of those layers of comfort that I know that I'm wrapped in rubber and a shield against anything like that as well.
Now, in San Francisco Bay, which is latitude 38 and longitude 122, talk to me about the difference in growth winter versus summer on a typical boat.
Great question. This is actually a common misunderstanding up here, is that the transition from winter to summer is water temperature and that you have more growth in warmer waters. It's actually not true. We have plenty of growth in really cold water. If you go up to Alaska, the boats are covered with growth too in freezing cold water. We have cold water here, we have growth all year round. It's a function of daylight. So as the daylight increases in the summer, the algae has more sunlight to grow with. And so we have less growth in the winter because we have less sunlight. Our water temperatures change very little.
And so in the bay, whatever there are 24 harbors or so on, does the water temperature vary from harbor to harbor to harbor? And if so, how much?
It does. So if you are right on the bay, if you're at St. Francis, then you are constantly getting all of the fresh water coming through the gate. And so your water temperatures are going to be colder. If you go further up the Delta, or if you go into San Rafael, that water is really shallow and it doesn't have as much of a changeover. And so it will warm up. So it might be 53 degrees in Tiburon or San Francisco. The water temperature might be up towards 70 degrees in San Rafael on really hot days. So yeah, we have to adjust based on that. You can't work in a wetsuit in 70-degree water on a summer day out there, that's for sure.
So now when a boat sails in San Francisco Bay, and let's say it's in the water in a harbor in San Francisco Bay, but then it goes up to the Delta in the summer, what happens to the growth when you get into purely freshwater? And where is the salinity line these days? Where is the saltwater to freshwater salinity line as you go up? So two questions.
Yeah. So that line in salinity is always changing. You have to keep in mind that San Francisco Bay is fed by fresh water from all different areas. And so even the levels of salinity are changing in the bay itself. When you travel up into fresh water, it's true, you will kill all the growth that's used to that salt water. The problem with it is it doesn't die and then fall off. What it does is it dies and it clings on even harder. And so you can go up there and it will die and it won't grow any further, but it will still be on there. So if you're heading up there, get it cleaned before you go up there, and then you'll have a perfectly clean boat the entire time you're up there. And that brings up another point where I was talking about using aluminum anodes versus zinc. That's really important because aluminum is very active in both saltwater and freshwater, saltwater and brackish water. And so for the people moving back and forth between San Francisco and the Delta, it's really important that you have aluminum because it will cover you in both areas in a way that zinc cannot.
So now, if I remember correctly from chemistry, zinc is like a couple of times heavier, 2.5 or so times heavier than aluminum. Is that, have I got that?
That sounds about right. I don't remember the exact weight, but yeah, that sounds
okay.
Right.
And so does zinc attract electricity better than aluminum? If so, how much better is it than aluminum, or vice versa?
So yeah, it's the other way around. And so when you actually have a spectrum which are called noble metals, and on that chart it lists metals in how um, what their ability is to attract a charge. And aluminum actually will attract a charge. It will lose electrical ions faster than zinc. So that's why it will degrade faster, and that's why it will protect your boat faster. So if you have an aluminum anode connected to zinc, which would then be a cathode, and speaking chemistry-wise, the aluminum would send electrons over to the zinc. And so because of that, aluminum will degrade faster and before zinc will. And that's why it protects your boat better.
Why do people use zinc if aluminum attracts the electricity better than zinc?
Well, this is a fairly new thing, and it's going through the industry fairly quickly that we're seeing this. The big part of it was you could pour zinc, you could mold zinc into several different, very complex shapes that you couldn't with aluminum before. And so it's much easier to work with. Now we're getting to the point where we can stamp aluminum and mold it into these very complex shapes. And that's making them far more affordable now than they used to be.
So tell us, what is it, back to the basic purpose of putting a zinc or an aluminum on a prop shaft or elsewhere on the boat? Tell us how it benefits the boat. I know it's real basic algebra for the average person, but many people are not familiar with why you put a zinc or an aluminum on a boat in the first place.
Yeah.
Where do you put it?
It's actually very complex, and we're getting into pretty deep chemistry here. But if you put two metals that are connected together in salt water, you are forming a battery. And in a battery, you have a positive side and a negative side. You have an anode and a cathode. And so what's happening is you are taking electrons away from one of those metals, and you're transferring those electrons to the other metal. And so if you have a boat sitting in salt water and you have two different types of metals, for instance, a brass propeller and a stainless steel propeller shaft, you've created a battery, and one of those metals will corrode. They're going to be sending the electrons over to the other metal, and it will corrode. So what we're doing is we are introducing another metal as a sacrifice. We are putting a cheaper metal that we can replace easily on there that will corrode faster than the other metals. So if you put aluminum on a stainless steel prop shaft, then the aluminum of that anode will lose its electrons, sending it over to the stainless steel one, and that one will degrade, and the stainless steel one will be untouched. Does that make sense?
So how often, give us a typical aluminum or zinc replacement cycle, again, a 40-foot boat.
If it is healthy and in a healthy environment, they can last a year. They can go further than that. If there are other things affecting it, then it can be much faster.
And what causes unhealthy electricity in a harbor? And don't give us the names of the harbors. I think that'd be tough on the harbor masters, but is there a significant difference? I keep my boat in Belvedere, for instance.
Yeah, there are so many different things, from the electrical lines running out, on the docks. They're all being plugged into boats, and the electrical system of the boats are running that electricity through other things. Everything's connected. So if you have electricity running to a pump that's then running through a through hole, you're essentially connecting to the outside, and you can be sending current out into the ocean. So, I mean, there's a long list of things, and there are professionals out there that make whole careers of going out and finding where these random stray currents are coming from. Now, the big thing is harbors, what they look at is if you plug electricity into a boat, it's a circuit. So you need to have the same amount of electricity going into the boat as you have coming out of the boat. And so if there's a discrepancy between the two, so if you're sending power to a boat and you're getting less power back, then you know you're losing power. And so, like for instance, at San Francisco Yacht Club, they're installing a very sophisticated system to track that and to check that and to make sure that's not happening. And you can look at that. That's one of the first things that you know, marine electricians will come and look at, is how much power is going to the boat and how much is coming back. But there are many different ways that electricity can end up in the water.
So that's fascinating. I didn't realize. I you know, simply have a plug to charge, constantly trickle charge the 12-volt battery in my 33.5-foot International One design. And what you're telling me is that while electricity is coming into my boat without me knowing it, on that alternating current, you know, yellow cord connects to my boat, there's also a way to measure the electricity that's alternate current going off of my boat. Is that what you're telling me?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
And I never even thought about that. Okay. And so
Yeah.
harbors, thoughtful harbors, monitor this, you're telling me, and the harbor that my boat's kept in Belvedere is particularly in a project to upgrade the technology they use to make
Yeah,
sure
they had a great setup before, and they are improving it even further now, which is tremendous.
So there are some harbors in San Francisco Bay and tributaries, you're saying, that might not have as diligent current care, electrical care.
Yeah, you can walk out on the dock and you can see right away how much care and attention they put into the docks, and that's your first indication.
So you're just saying physically look at the dock and look at the care of the dock, and that might tell you, that's just the tip of the iceberg. That might tell you that elsewhere on the dock, there may be stray currents, more likely in low maintenance environments. Is that what you're suggesting?
Yeah, and then another thing to look for is as you're entering any dock, oftentimes they will have an electrical panel right there on the gangway down to the dock, and it should have an emergency shut off and basically a ground fault interrupt with lights on it that will tell you if an electrical problem is happening on the dock. So as you go out, before you go down, look around for one of those and see if they have one of those, and that will give you an indication as well.
Okay, so, you know, having raced sailboats for, 60 years now, I have always imagined that bottom guys with the brush run their brush fore and aft versus vertically up and down in the hull. That seems like maybe is a silly thing. Does that actually happen? How do you, on race days, how do you wash the bottom of a boat? Do you actually do?
Yeah, that's a great question, and that's one of the geeky things that I do. So naturally, when you're under a boat, it is easier to scrub side to side from the water line towards the keel. That's just more of a natural motion for you to make. Now,
wait, from the water line to the keel, you mean vertically up and down, or do you mean
vertically up and down? Now, the thing is, especially with ablative paints, as you're scrubbing, you're removing paint. And so to get really geeky about it, whenever I'm cleaning race boats, I make sure that I am going fore and aft, because I feel like I am making little tiny channels in that paint, and I want that to follow the stream of water from the bow to the stern of the boat.
So what kind of, you go underwater, you've got a special 7 mil wetsuit. What kind of tanks do you take, and tell us what other gear you bring down there with you?
Well, I do as much of it as I can without tanks, you know, from the water line, and just on a snorkel. And then to get down, I put on a scuba tank, so it's just normal scuba diving. Now with that, I make very specific choices in my gear. Like for instance, I use a special kind of swim fins that if you're down in Southern California or Hawaii, you'll see all the lifeguards wearing. And they're very stiff, but they're very small, and they're all rubber. There's no metal on them. So as I'm kicking around, I know I don't have any metal on my feet that I can accidentally kick into the keel or the hull of the boat and cause damage. Likewise, all my other gear, I make sure it's rubberized and cannot, as I'm moving around working on it, cannot actually bump into or hurt the vessel.
And so are you wearing gloves? And then what kind of brushes or material do you rub against the hull of the boat?
Yeah, so the water is not the cleanest water. And so I protect myself as best I can. I'm in a full wetsuit with boots and gloves, and my head's covered, and my face is covered the best I can with it. And then I have a range of tools, from very soft cloths for working on brand new boats or working on prop speed, to very thick and dense sponges, scrub pads, actually, for scrubbing areas that, like, pour paint or things that you actually need to get through excessive growth or working on other areas of the boat. When you come to metals, then I have a range of scraping tools and polishing tools to polish up the metals and to make sure that they're working good and nice and clean. So it's a whole range of cleaning tools, and then tools themselves for changing out the anodes, fixing any problems with the props or any other things that might be happening on the boat itself. So we go out with a full complement of tools as well.
So is I correct in understanding that during the summertime, when there's more sun, there's more growth on the bottoms of the boats?
Yes.
And so I know there's all these different hull shapes, but is most of the growth then right close to the water line, and as you go down, it diminishes in growth? Talk a little bit about the growth profile vertically as you go underwater and how that's affected by the hull shape of the boat.
Yeah, definitely. That's a great question. So we have a couple of different types of algae. So we've got your standard seaweeds, which are algae. The common ones we see out there are actually sea lettuce. It's a form of sea lettuce that is very fine and stringy. That's very common on the boats on the water line. Now, as you go down, you start to see a different type of growth, which is a slime growth. It's very slippery and it's very hard to get off. And this is one of the things that we see on vessels with very poor paint, is that the slime will grow on it, and it's like scrubbing off tar. It's like, if you've ever walked on, years ago, well, maybe it's still happening. Years ago, if you walk on the beaches of Santa Barbara, you would get oil on your feet, and it would be murder to scrub it off your feet. That's what the slime is like, scrubbing off the bottom of the boat if it's allowed to grow. And so that will grow deeper. It doesn't need as much sunlight on it. So you'll oftentimes, on poor paint, you'll see that on the keel. But on good paint, you'll see it go from thicker, bushier growth down to very thin, very flat growth on the keel.
So in bottom jobs, traditionally, the yard puts 2 coats of bottom paint on when you get the job done. A couple of years ago, since I race a lot and the bottom has to be cleaned, once every couple of weeks or so, I began putting 3 coats, or asking the yard to put 3 coats of bottom paint on my boat. So what if I put 4 coats? What's the benefit downside of putting extra coats? I figured as long as they're working on the boat, more efficient if they put more coats on while the boat's hauled out, right then and there, it might be just better for the boat. Talk to me about that.
Well, then you're trying to find a balance at that point. You can, especially with a blade of paint, you can put several coats on, and as the paint sloughs off, you're revealing fresh layers of that paint. So if you put multiple coats on, it's going to last longer. However, you can walk into any marine store and pick up a couple of those cans of paint. And so what you're sacrificing is weight. You are putting a lot more weight on your boat if you're putting a lot of paint on it. So it's finding that balance of how many coats to put on to get you to your next haul out, and how heavy you want your boat to be. So that's the big change off there. And paint is heavy. You have to keep in mind that a blade of paint is a huge percentage of copper. Each paint has a different percentage, but it's a lot. And copper is a metal, and it's heavy. And so you can go and pick up the different cans of paint, and you'll see the difference in weight. And that's all going on your boat and adding to the overall weight.
So now you mentioned earlier that it would take you about an hour to do a 40-foot powerboat's bottom if it's in good shape. What about a sailboat? Does it take more time to do sailboats, or are there different hull shapes that take more time? First the sailboat question, then the hull shape question, please.
Yeah, it really depends on the setup. You have to keep in mind that the motor yacht has a flat bottom, so it doesn't have as much surface area. However, it has all of the running gear, the propellers and the trim tabs and all of that, which is complicated and it takes more time to clean. However, the sailboats have these big keels, which significantly adds to the surface area. Where the sail drive might be easier to clean, you're cleaning a lot more surface area overall. So overall, motor yachts take a little more time to clean than sailboats do, which is why they're oftentimes a little more expensive. But it's pretty close. I would say there's probably, well, it's hard to tell. With each setup, each boat is completely different. So Marin Yacht Care does not have a standard pricing setup. We talk with the owners and find out exactly what their goals are and what their boat specifically is like and what it is health-wise. And then we come up with a pricing structure that actually matches that boat, not a standard rate because of that.
So now, a while ago, I went down to a pier in San Francisco called Pier 39, and I was looking at a boat there. There's America's Cup, an 03 boat there, number 76, Brad Webb's boat. Anyway, I noticed on other boats that there was lots of grass, and other boats it seemed to be wide-bladed seaweed. Talk to me about the different species of seaweed that grow. Some seems like stringy and some seems like wide blade. I didn't look carefully enough to know about this. Could you please talk to us about the different species of seaweed that grow on the bottoms of boats?
Yeah, I'd love to. One of my other passions. Yeah, so the seaweed that looks like grass is a sea lettuce. It's a type of sea lettuce. It just forms really small blades of grass, basically, the sea lettuce. You can also have sea lettuce that is very broadleaf, and so it has big, broad, very fluffy leaves to it. You can tell that it's sea lettuce because they're the same color. They're a very bright green, almost emerald color to them growing on there. But there's several different types, but sea lettuce is the main type of seaweed that can really grab on to holes in the seaweed world. But there's many other. There's a hard type of algae called coralline, and you'll see it.
Can you spell that, coralline?
Coraline. And so that if you go out and look in tide pools, it ranges from very flat mats on rocks, and it's white or it's pink or it can be orange sometimes, or it grows into things that almost look like coral, very delicate branches. But this is an algae, it's seaweed, but it encrusts itself in calcium. So it has a very tough shell around it. And I find that a lot on propeller blades and unprotected metals. It will grab onto that and grow. It really likes that. And so you have to go through, it's almost like a calcification that you have to scrape off of it.
So now, when you wash a racing bottom, you don't see barnacles anywhere, but I've seen other boats in boat yards that come out, and I've seen barnacles on the bottom, like on the bottom of the keels. Why do barnacles grow in one place or another, and where do they grow?
Barnacles will grow everywhere. Barnacles are very good at growing. The thing is, they take time to grow. From the time, they need at least 4, 5, 6 weeks to grab hold and actually start to grow and form their calcifications. So if you're cleaning your vessel regularly, you'll never see barnacles because we are actually wiping them off before they can grow to that point. It's only when the cleaning goes far beyond that they're there and that they can actually grow and form their calcified bodies that you see. It's the same thing with mussels. There's basically mussels and barnacles floating around in the water looking for a place to attach and to go through their life cycle. And if they land on your boat and they're given time, they will grow into the shell and what you normally know as a barnacle and mussel. If you wipe that off before they can grow, then you'll never see that. So I see that especially In some boats where we have really low tides, so we've had some really low tides this year, and if your keel dips into the mud, you're actually inoculating your keel with barnacle larvae, basically. And so if I come a week or two later and wipe that all off, it wipes off very easy. But if I don't come out for 6 weeks, 8 weeks, then you will have your entire keel covered in barnacles. And the problem with that is barnacles hold on so tight, when I remove them, they're actually removing chunks of paint with them. So that's one of the things we really want to avoid is allowing the barnacles to grow at all. We need to wipe them off before they can grow.
So you said if a boat goes in the mud, it sits in mud, it grows barnacles more rapidly than if it's just in water.
Yeah.
Okay, and what happens to the barnacles in fresh water? Do they die but just still remain attached?
Yeah, exactly. So you can kill the organism, but their calcium shell, their skeleton will still be there.
Okay, so now I like sushi, and I've had great seaweed in sushi stores. What's the difference between that kind of sushi or types of sushi and that which we see on the bottoms of boats, if difference?
Very, very little. If you go out in San Francisco, if you go out into San Francisco and you look on the docks, especially this time of year, you can see big giant leaves, 3-4 feet long and about 2 feet wide, and they are dark green in color, and that's wakame, which is your common seaweed salad that you get in a sushi restaurant.
What is that? What is the retail price per pound of that stuff?
Wakame is on the less expensive side because it grows so big and it's easy to find and harvest.
So $10 a pound, what's the deal?
Probably, yeah, right around there.
But you actually, that's the kind, you said that people actually are served in sushi restaurants. Just now, what's the difference between the more expensive $100 a pound seaweed?
So here in California, so starting around, well, just south of Santa Cruz, around Monterey, and then going north up into Oregon and Washington, we have a very special type of seaweed that only grows here in the world, and it's called sea palm. Now it's protected, you cannot go out and harvest it, but if you have a special license, you can, and I have one of those licenses. So they look like little tiny palm trees, and they grow in the impact zone of waves on rocks, so it's really hard to get to them. But you can snip off their leaves. They're big. They almost look like Dr. Seuss trees growing out there. You can snip off their leaves, and if you do it in a careful way, they'll grow back, and you can harvest from them many times over a season. But it's unique to California, and it is one of the most amazing, divine tasting seaweeds you'll ever put in your mouth. And since it's so hard to get, it's very, very expensive.
So last year, St. Francis Yacht Club had the Commodore's cruise to Fiji. So we 80 of us went down, had fun, and dove those beautiful coral reefs that protect Fiji. And so there we were with our wetsuits and so on underwater in our vacation diving. So the question is, what does a professional diver do for vacation? Give me an ideal vacation for you.
The same thing, the same exact thing. I love the ocean, so I have to vacation near the ocean or on the ocean. So, if it's here in California or if it's going to Hawaii, you'll find me in the ocean diving, free diving. I love going out and getting on outrigger canoes, and so I'm part of an outrigger canoe club, so I'm out on the water canoeing a lot. It's just anything around the ocean you'll find me doing. Sure.
What about the family? What about how do you introduce kids, and how soon do they get introduced into diving in aqua life?
Right away. As soon as they're born, they're in the water. Yeah.
And don't you have one little youngster?
I have 3 little boys, and they range from 2 to 13, and so. My 2-year-old loves the water. He's constantly going in it. And my 13-year-old, Kian, he comes out and he will help me clean boats and work in the harbor.
I'm fascinated by the videos that you prepare automatically as part of your report to clients. What kind of cameras are you using?
Yeah, that is constantly changing, honestly, because the environment is so demanding and underwater photography is very, very difficult. So I've cycled through several different types of camera, and right now I have a couple of different types that I use that I go back and forth between the still pictures and the videos. For the videos, I still go with the GoPros. I have GoPros that I use for different.
And do you turn them on by reaching up, or do you have a remote switch?
Both. Actually, I carry one by hand for taking still pictures and for changing things around, and then I have one mounted on my mask that I can just record the entire activity start to finish.
Great. Well, Kevin Kelley of Marin Yacht Care, it's been our pleasure to have you as a guest speaker on the Wednesday Yachting Luncheon. Thank you so much. Stay safe, and thanks for introducing such a high level of professionalism to underwater yacht care. Thanks so much.
Thank you.
With that,
appreciate that.
thank you. With that, Wednesday Yachting Luncheon is adjourned.